our principles that I hope would resonate with you is that we want to help you with a process that is inclusive, that's public-driven, that is transparent, that's carefully designed and considerate of those people that we want to include, that is both intuitive and informed, and that it leads to implementation. We think these principles are important because they lead to certain benefits in terms of creating ownership in what we're doing, a legitimacy and trust, realistic outcomes, and being able to affect both present and future decisions. The mayor mentioned that this idea is not about a quick fix, that there is a long-term, 20-year sort of horizon, but I expect that when we start working with you, that there's going to be recommendations that you have that really should be acted upon immediately, in the short term, mid-term, and long term as we go through the process. So in terms of generally our approach is that we're in this very early phase of the process where we're getting organized, things like doing the tour, gathering data and reports. We will be compiling a bibliography of things that the staff has pulled together for us. When that is shared with you between now and our next meeting, I'd really like for you to take a look at that. And if your organization, or if you know of another organization, has documents that you think could inform this process, we would like to know about them. We're not interested in reinventing or spending the community's resources if we don't have to do that. We are going to do 2 steps in this technical analysis. We're going to do a baseline profile that looks at some higher order indicators about where the community is and what some of the trends suggest. And then we're going to do this first round of public involvement, and we're going to understand what some of the important issues are and ideas from the public. And then we're going to work with you to inform a more in-depth research, as opposed to doing a very broad, unfocused analysis. We're going to do an initial piece and then a more targeted piece. The public participation component has 3 really important components in terms of engaging the community. Right now, we're targeting very early December for the first round of approximately 4 meetings, like December 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. We'll talk about the calendar a little bit later. And so between now and then, which is about 6-7 weeks, we're going to be working very closely with you and other volunteers to prepare for those efforts. Those meetings will be, in large part, brainstorming meetings. Many of you have probably been to public meetings or public hearings, and what you typically do at a lot of those is react to someone else's proposal. These meetings are really going to be more about a blank slate and working in small groups to identify what is important for them, what aspirations do they have for the future of Muncie, their neighborhood, this community. We're also going to work with them with some map-based exercise because we really want to understand some of the physical issues that are important to them. We'll take that information, we'll database it, and we'll work with you to analyze really kind of what that means in terms of moving forward. We'll work with you to distill that raw input into some higher level policy directions, the goals for us. We will then have a meeting where we go back to the public and share what we think we've learned, essentially checking back in with them to make sure that we have appropriately distilled the essence of what they shared with us before we start making specific policy recommendations. And that is really that step there, probably in the January timeframe, where we actually bring them back to an event that we call Community Choices. It was interesting that so many of you used the word about, you have choices. And you should have choices about what this place will be like in the future. We'll begin working with you to draft a plan, and then with the adoption production happening, we believe in the May to June timeframe. We're working with the management committee in the next 2 weeks on a more specific timeline for this. We met with them earlier today, but this is generally where we're headed with the process. We expect the steering committee over this course of this to meet usually about once a month. But we are going to front load this a little bit and ask you to meet between now and the first part of December, in a 2 to 3 week cycle. But we'll try to make up for that later in the process. But about once a month is what we're we're looking for in terms of the steering committee. You may get involved in some of the subcommittees. You may decide that you'd like to be a small group facilitator in some of these meetings. So there's more that you can actually do in this process. But in terms of the steering committee, it should average about once a month, which means somewhere between 9 and 11 meetings for the body. So related to the roles and responsibilities, I want to talk about each one of these and then make specific references to the actual steering committee. In the simplest way, this is how I would define the roles and the relationships. That it really is the role of the steering committee to lead this effort. We're going to facilitate it. We're going to put choices in front of you, but it is really up to you to help guide the process and the substance. Ultimately, the community leadership will adopt the plan that you recommend, but you're going to lead this project. We do believe that there are other stakeholders that may not be represented in this group, that may be unlikely to come to an open call meeting, and so we're prepared to engage them in some targeted input. And you can help us identify who some of those targets are once you have a better sense about who's in the room here and who may not be involved. But we do have the need to have some targeted input. We believe that the public is, in terms of their role, is really in the broad input in this process. And that the management team committee is really in charge of managing the process, working closely with you, working closely with us. And that what you've hired us for is to facilitate this and from a process design point, provide leadership about how this actually works. And more specifically on the steering committee, I would like to emphasize that you're here in part because the management team tried to put together a collection of people that were both passionate and representative of different perspectives. And so you're here to share your own experiences, but also to be reflecting whether it's youth issues or young student issues in terms of education. You're representing those. We are going to do some work and bring material to you, but we're really wanting you to help us in the analysis, helping to make sense about what people have told us or what particular trend research indicates, and provide balance in how this actually works. We want you to participate actively in these meetings as well as outside these meetings. As I said, if we're going to get beyond the dropping the pebble, that means that you guys have to be active in doing that. How many of you have read the book The Tipping Point or heard of the book The Tipping Point with Malcolm Gladwell? Well, then many of you are familiar with the phenomenon that he talks about. To get products or ideas to tip, it takes a number of things to happen. One of them is having sticky messages, right? Sticky messages. And when we talk about, in a little bit, brainstorming about what do we have to say to people to help motivate them, we're really talking about what are the sticky messages. Malcolm also says, when these things have to tip, that there needs to be a maven, somebody who takes the sticky ideas and distributes them. Well, you're at the core of the maven activity in this process to participate actively in getting others involved. So I mentioned these process committees. If any of you have been involved, and I imagine Eric is quite familiar with this, that it's just not enough in a public planning process to put a legal notice in the paper that there's going to be a meeting that's going to take place. It's just not going to motivate people to come. To get involvement beyond the usual suspects or the civically obsessed, whatever you want to call them, to get participation upon them really takes a lot of hard work to do that. And so what we've recommended, and this is based on years and years of really working hard to get representative turnout in a self-selected process, is really organizing a series of process committees, a publicity committee, an outreach committee, and a logistics committee. I'd like for all of you to think about where you might be able to make the best contribution in terms of helping with the process aspects. as I said earlier, the next 2 to 3 months, we're going to be really focused on getting people to participate in this process. And for those of you who are more substantive oriented, that will come. But I'd like to talk about each one of these, but I also would like you to think about